Okay, we're going to get started again. I know there are a couple of people who are still out in the lobby, but we want to try and stay on schedule. So thank you very much. We're into our session 2 right now, and it gives me pleasure to introduce Jeff Caudill. Jeff is a senior consultant at Green Building Services. He combines his green building experience with over 3 years as a land use planner to identify innovative green building strategies at various project phases, including planning, design, construction, and operations. In the last 5 years, Jeff has contributed to over 40 LEED projects, including LEED for new construction and neighborhood development. And his presentation today is Ecoroofs and their contribution to LEED certification. So please welcome Jeff.
Hi there. So, as was stated, this is apparently a version issue with consulting. But so I work at Green Building Services. We are a green building consulting firm here in Portland. We've been involved. Yeah. Can I be shorter? So we've been involved with green building essentially since 2000. As I was saying to Linda, we started as a part of PGE and we're sort of the Green Building Services and the Earth Advantage program were part of PGE. In 2005, both of those companies spun off and became more sort of for-profit. We're a for-profit company. Earth Advantage is a nonprofit. So we provide a range of services, and I'll skip the self-promotion after I finish this. Basically, we work with project teams. We're an advocate for green building. Within project teams, we help with energy modeling and building simulation, help people who are pursuing green buildings and or LEED buildings to evaluate different strategies, understand payback, those types of things to identify sort of life cycle cost approaches to comparing strategies, and also just basically trying to increase the amount of green building strategies that are incorporated into a project. So we've actually been involved in more than 400 LEED projects. Anyone, so people who have been involved in LEED projects before? Okay. People who hate LEED? I think what I would say is this is basically sort of thinking, I don't want to go over, you probably know a lot about the benefits of Ecoroofs. As I said, our role in a lot of ways, and I'll come back to this consistently, is within the project team, we work with the owner, the architect, the landscape architect to identify strategies. So one of the things that we often do is what's called an eco-charrette, to think about different strategies early on in the project to identify what's feasible. And then if there is additional investigation needed, we help with that process. So what I'll do is just kind of, you probably know a lot of these, hopefully some of these you don't think of, or in terms of the benefits of Ecoroofs, and then I'll just sort of talk about how that relates to LEED certification. So it'd be pretty brief in terms of how that relates. I don't want to get to the details of kind of the LEED credit requirements, but really thinking about the overall message is Ecoroofs obviously can contribute significantly to LEED projects. And I think the other piece of this is that so currently there is a new version of LEED that is being in the process of being adopted. I don't know if any of you are involved with that, but it was actually supposed to be released last year. But it is LEED, USGBC is a consensus-based organization, so they've had some pushback, let's say. And I don't know, like I said, if any of you have looked at some of the previous versions of the upcoming LEED rating system. But so it's on the verge after 5 rounds of input of being adopted. And so the overall message is that I think things like Ecoroofs and more, I guess, progressive and proactive green stormwater management strategies will become more important in terms of LEED certification. So just quickly, some benefits. Like I said, some of these are rather common. Obviously, there's stormwater management benefits, and we'll talk about that. Habitat open space, and I think this is increasingly important, especially in the urban environment, and providing open space for people where maybe that might be a zero lot line type project. Heat island effect, basically the effect of roofs on sort of the temperature within developed areas. Roof longevity, which has been touched on a little bit this morning, and then actually some role in energy performance, so basically improving the energy performance of projects. So obviously the first thing you probably think about in terms of Ecoroofs is the stormwater management component. What we try to do is really think of the site and the building as one piece to help project teams replicate more natural stormwater patterns. So obviously an eco-roof can be the first step in that process for the building itself. Often we want to connect that to more at-grade infrastructure, bioswales, et cetera, but it can be extremely important as a filter, both in terms of stormwater quality and stormwater quantity. And then basically, as I said, we can, through that, increase evapotranspiration on the site and really, again, more mimic a more natural system. So you might be familiar with this study that was actually done by the city of Portland, but really they had evaluated the amounts of quantity that comes off of. And for LEED, really the question that you need to address is what is leaving the site, right? So that's really what the LEED rating systems address. It says you have various strategies on site, how much actually goes into the sewer. That's kind of the end point that you're trying to get to with LEED. And so, as you can see, significant reductions in both volumes in terms of gallons per year, essentially less than half of the estimate in Portland for, as compared to a conventional roof. And then for peak flows, similarly, that slowing of the water that comes off of the roof, just basically a fraction of the peak flow coming off of that roof. So critical role within both reducing volumes and peak amounts. So one of the things that we work with our clients on is really thinking about synergies. So having, obviously for an eco roof, there's structural implications, the landscape architect, the architect. So one of the ways in which those synergies really manifest themselves is through the possibility of open space. So in addition to providing just that stormwater potential, there is a possibility, especially with more, thoughtful and specific plantings, et cetera, within an eco roof to actually create islands of vegetation for birds. Another thing that, and this is something that comes into LEED for neighborhood development, but really thinking about how to provide agriculture within the urban context. So this is eco roofs are another option for increasing urban agriculture, so food grown on roofs to either support that specific project or maybe elsewhere. And I think that's another component, especially for green building, that is becoming more sought after. And the ideas of providing examples of success with providing urban agriculture. So I was saying we actually work, I have a couple of case studies from around in Portland at the end here, but so we work in Doha, Qatar, with with interface engineering on a large project and in the Middle East, and they're actually trying to figure out a way to grow food there. this is, I would say, the sort of forefront of of true sustainability, regardless of what it means for LEED, is the idea of supporting yourself with, on-site production, whether that be energy, water, food. And so it's challenging. It's a very dry climate in Doha, but there is a significant effort to try to make that happen and incorporate as much as possible, as much as we can, into that project for on-site agricultural growth. And then in terms of the synergies, obviously a roof, maybe not obviously, but a roof garden is an amenity. And we'll talk about some of the examples in a couple of the case studies that I have. People want to be around vegetation. If you have a roof deck or something like that, combining it with and thinking about how not only does it have the sort of functional aspect, but a more aesthetic aspect for your tenants and or residents. So heat island effect, the keynote was from Chicago. This is like a pretty, I guess, quintessential photo of a green roof, and especially on this historic project in Chicago. But essentially the idea here is reducing the amount of heat gain from roofing. Essentially and this comes out in a number of different ways. Ecoroofs basically create another layer of insulation, thermal insulation, to reduce the impact of direct sunlight on the roof area. And so thus it can reduce the amount that actually is sent back into the microclimate. So this is critical, especially in more dense areas. We're always trying to find ways to kind of reduce the impact and the heat island effect that results from real dense development, and obviously eco-roofs can do that. So another thing that, and it was mentioned, once you have an eco-roof established and it provides that kind of barrier on the roof area, it can actually result in significant reduction in maintenance requirements and costs. So what you're doing is essentially you're extending the life of the underlying roof material because it is now protected from the elements essentially via the eco-roof. And so, one of the things one consideration when we're talking about materials in a project is how can we maximize durability. So potentially this is one way for a project to do that for the roof. So it might increase the life of the underlying roof material by 50%, which can be significant. So going from 20 to 30 years potentially. So there can be significant benefits, especially if the eco-roof is designed appropriately, and more specifically, like was mentioned by Tom, I think, was if it requires no irrigation. So if again there's no upkeep, if you can design it to respond to the climate effectively to where you do not need to use irrigation, it can also, on a kind of operations and maintenance basis, really be beneficial. So another aspect that you might not think about, or maybe you do, but is the idea this additional layer essentially of insulation can result in reduced energy use. So basically there's been a number of studies that show that again with that layer of soil that's on top of the more traditional roof, you basically have less heat transfer, and thus you have less activity by your heating and air conditioning system to respond to that heat transfer. In Portland, we're a heat-dominated climate, which means most of the time when we are using the heating and air conditioning, we're using heating. The energy benefits are a little less prominent for heating. For cooling, they are rather significant in terms of keeping that the need for cooling down. But as shown here, you can reduce the heat transfer by essentially 70–90%. And so these things can then translate to an overall more efficient building in terms of energy use, et cetera. This was from the same study that the city of Portland did. For Portland specifically, they estimated basically a 12% reduction in energy per square foot per year. So again, even in this climate, the energy impacts can be substantial for an owner or a developer. I guess I would say one thing that we always are dealing with is the bottom line in terms of how do we convince the developer who potentially could be an owner to invest in these types of strategies. It's sometimes difficult. The incentives that have been provided by the City of Portland make a significant difference in terms of justifying it, but I would say it is often challenging because other than these potential energy benefits, the translation to sort of economic bottom line benefits is not always there. So things like if you can have for stormwater that comes off of your site, with the city providing reductions as a result of the reduction in so your system development charges, that's one way we've tried to get there in terms of actually justifying it economically. It can sometimes be challenging. So some of the more boring parts of how it equates to LEED. So there are a number of credits. So basically, that currently it affects. If you are familiar with the LEED rating system, you're probably familiar with these. As we talked about, protecting and restoring habitat. So essentially, LEED a credit requires that you are using. This would require that the plant selection was native to meet these requirements. Maximizing open space, so especially in more dense locations, you can take credit as a part of your overall open space for the Ecoroof. Quantity control, as we talked about, we can have significant reductions in stormwater quantities that are leaving the site. Again, for quantity control, this requires the civil engineer to do an analysis of the amount of stormwater that's leaving the site and show adequate reductions. Quality control, so LEED is very focused on total suspended solids in terms of quality, so the removal of total suspended solids. Obviously, the roof area, because it's mainly, there's not going to be the same type of contaminants that you might see on a parking lot or something like that. You're still going to have, to meet these requirements, you're still going to have other strategies to effectively increase stormwater quality, but it can be an important component in that pursuit. And then, as we talked about, heat island effect for the roof area. So in relation to irrigation, if you are able to provide for an eco-roof with no irrigation, that is a significant contribution to this water-efficient landscaping. Obviously, again, if there's any sort of at-grade vegetation, you would need to address those areas. Essentially, the first step is a reduction of 50% compared to baseline. The second, basically, threshold is removal of any irrigation for the project. And then, and as I said, we'll talk about what is becoming a sort of more stringent requirements, but obviously for energy and atmosphere, so for energy performance, that makes up, so the total available points, if you're not familiar with it, is for LEED is 110, and for energy, there's up to 19 points that are available. So the role of energy and the potential impacts on energy savings as a result of an eco-roof are substantial, or can be substantial. So In terms of what's ahead, you know, I think if anyone familiar with Living Building Challenge? Yeah. So in this new version, I think there's, well, let's step back a sec. So the process, the aim of LEED is market transformation. And so one of the challenges to the aggressiveness of LEED is Living Building Challenge. And I think that, so they've started to incorporate those more aggressive targets and will continue to utilize more aggressive targets with each round of a new rating system. So there will be, in this new version, a more stringent stormwater requirement, and so finding ways to effectively reduce the amount of stormwater runoff that is created by your project will be more important. One thing that's interesting, if there are civil engineers in the audience here, so they're changing how they measure and the performance criteria for stormwater management. So really, it's a question of at a baseline being able to accommodate 95% of a average storm within your region. So this is another change that is happening for LEED, is that it's trying to become more regionally appropriate, regionally responsive, because this has been a significant critique of the LEED rating system, is it's sort of a one-size-fits-all. So in this case, we're looking at you know, being able to accommodate a 95th percentile storm. In addition, you know, one of the things that happens generally when they issue a new rating system is they're using a more current energy code standard. So that will happen again. The energy performance requirements will be higher in this next version, and really pushing the envelope on how efficient your buildings are. Related to that, one of the things that LEED has had some challenges with is the idea that LEED buildings don't actually perform better. So another thing that it has that is now required is to share your energy and water data with the USGBC once the project is built for 5 years, to start to get to that, to understand whether LEED projects actually do perform better or not. There'll still be a continued emphasis on open space, and then actually a new prerequisite will be added for all the landscape architects. Probably this would be good for your efforts. For those projects that are pursuing LEED, there is going to be a water use reduction requirement. So if you are pursuing a LEED certification, you will need to show a minimum of 30% water use reduction in your landscaping. So this is a sort of, again, a sort of slow progression by the USGBC. In the last version of LEED, they added an indoor water use reduction requirement, and so now they are adding an exterior water use requirement. Water will continually be a critical issue throughout the world. In the United States, we've already seen droughts, and so this is responding to those limitations that we're witnessing. Okay. Just a couple of case studies, just to give you a sense, literally 2 case studies, and I think the second case study will sort of transition to the next speaker pretty well. So Mercy Corps, you're probably familiar with this project. It's on the west side of the Burnside Bridge. A really awesome project, actually. If you have a chance, you should take a tour. They've done a lot of really interesting things in the project. One of those is so over here is the green roof. It's basically, it's 3,800 square feet. This is, we have an image here. So basically, really thinking kind of holistically about stormwater management on the so it's a combination. It was an expansion of an existing project. It was so the portion on your right here, this is heading east on Burnside. The portion on the right is the new portion, the new addition to the project. The portion on the left is existing. So they've added an Ecoroof there. And then one thing that we also work with our project teams on as much as possible, and especially with what I just learned that so for example, the City of Portland incentive for Ecoroofs is going away. One of the ways that what we try to do with our project teams and owners is to start at minimum, if it doesn't work financially early on, to start thinking about it being Ecoroof ready, PV ready, etc. So you're essentially designing. The key is to design to not preclude those things in the future when they might be determined to be more valuable, or you're making improvements on the building. You know, it's a recognition that the building will be there a long time, and so thinking about how you can design it to effectively, I guess, evolve over time. And so this is what they have done. In theory, you'll see there's PV here, but there's actually they were unable to put that into the building, and so it is a plan. They have accommodated. They would have designed the project to be able to accommodate PV in the future, and so this is something that we try to work with our teams to do, to think about, if you can't do it now, let's plan for it and accommodate and potentially get some I guess economies of scale, because you're already there doing a lot of the work, and so Ecoroofs would definitely be something that would fall in that category. One other, so Mercy Corps is a global relief agency. You probably know Mercy Corps. So Mirabella South Waterfront is another project that, this is an assisted living project in South Waterfront, also a really interesting project. Really emphasized the incorporation of green roofs. So there are, in total on the project, it's over 13,000 square feet of Ecoroof, and again, in terms of the synergies, so this will give you a sense in terms of the types of, or the size of the Ecoroof on the project. But again, in terms of those synergies we talked about, they have started to grow food there, and especially with something like a assisted living center where you can actually engage your occupants, and again, thinking about how not strictly thinking about Ecoroofs as a way to reduce stormwater or whatever, but really to serve as an amenity and contribute to your tenants and residents or whomever. So yeah, I think that's all I had. So this is me. If you have any questions.
It appears that we do have a couple of minutes for questions. Before I open that up, though, I did want to clarify one thing. On the Ecoroof incentive, for those of you who may be interested in that, we're in a hard position right now. It's in the mayor's proposed budget for a cut. That budget has not been confirmed yet by the rest of City Council. Who knows what could happen, but we felt like we needed to be honest about where we were. I take it as a challenge, however, and when I see the kind of things that we heard about Chicago and all the different tools in their tool basket, we don't have as many tools in our tool basket, and so I take this as a challenge, whether we have the incentive grant in its current form or some other form or something else, that we can do a lot more here in the city of Portland to really help the eco-roof industry, help people realize the benefits of eco-roofs. And so I take that as a personal challenge. I hope that you all feel challenged as well to see what is the next stage of our eco-roof development, both from a regulatory incentive, benefit analysis kind of approach. So it's not necessarily bad news, it's just a change. Okay, so did we have any questions for Jeff before we move on to the next speaker? down here.
Just curious about sites initiatives, single sites initiatives that be included in these kind of rendition or for waiting until that pilot process is ironed out, or if at all.
I think eventually that will be incorporated, but as it stands right now, it is not referenced in the current version. So the Sustainable Sites Initiative is another, if I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it's essentially a more site-focused rating system approach that has been prepared. The Lady Bird Johnson Foundation and the American Society of Landscape Architects have come together, and it's really looking at more from an ecological perspective how sites work, thinking about soils, really thinking, and buildings play a very small part of it, but it's really about how the landscape functions and how you're supporting kind of more ecosystem services and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, the USGBC has started to move in that direction, working and potentially incorporating some of these sustainable sites kind of concepts, requirements. Yes, sir. Right. I don't have that specific number. I would, in terms of our sort of what I've had conversations that have been more anecdotal, under 5%, essentially, percent more in terms of just providing structural support, maybe less. I mean, I think often it just sort of gets incorporated into the estimates, and so we haven't had specific. If a client is looking to do that, it's sort of they make that decision, and they take it on. But we haven't had actual feedback in terms of what the addition is. It's similarly for an Ecoroof, it's not as much of an additional cost as something like PV, for example. Because there's lots of all the other pieces that are associated with connecting electrical infrastructure and all of that stuff that can be more expensive. The other example that we often have is for double piping. So if you're looking to do rainwater catchment or something like that, and even if you don't have the storage capacity now, you plan for the 2 sets of pipes to enable you to do it in the future, and that's something that can be a real economy of scale just because you're already in there rather than having to open it back up and fit it in post-occupancy. Don't quote me, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, yeah, just structural, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, our next speaker is Elizabeth Hart. Elizabeth is an on-structure vegetation specialist experienced in all phases of green roofing, including design, installation, maintenance, and education. Elizabeth works with architects, contractors, and building owners to ensure each unique system functions as intended. And her green roof projects include hospitals, education facilities, municipal buildings, and residences. And today, her topic is green roofs in healthcare. Thank you.
Hey guys. So I'm Liz. As she mentioned, I'm a green roof specialist. So basically what I do for my company, which is a roofing manufacturer, it's Tremco, I coordinate the projects from the early design stages all the way through the install and follow-up maintenance. And so basically my passion is green roofing. It's something that I've studied for a long time, that I've really been into for a long time. I'm one of the founding members of GRIT, along with Matt and a few other people, and if I can just put a GRIT plug in, if we haven't done that, everybody please check out the Green Roof Info Think Tank, okay? So this is something that for me is really a life's mission, to see these green roofs go in and all the benefits to society and energy and everything else that we all know about green roofs. But before I got into green roofing, I actually had a whole other background in healthcare. And so I worked for about 5 years in a clinic, and then I also had about 2 years working as a lobbyist for a healthcare nonprofit, basically lobbying Congress and Senate on healthcare issues. So during that time, I really learned a lot about the patient experience, okay? And one of the things that I learned that's pretty common knowledge now is that patients who can see nature, if they just have visual access to nature, I'm talking through a window or something like that, they have better clinical outcomes. And I'm going to go into that more in a minute, but I also want to just let you know, for me personally, this really resonates because I don't really need any studies to show me that, even though we have those studies, because about 5 or 6 years ago, my best friend was in an accident and was in the hospital for about 2 months, and 3 of which was in ICU. And so I basically lived at a hospital with my friend during this recovery for endless days and weeks, and it was an extremely challenging experience. With all of the honor and respect that I have for the doctors and nurses that helped him through this and helped us through this, the environment itself is very, very challenging. So in addition to the studies that we have that show that patients actually have better clinical outcomes when they can see nature, there's also a lot of studies that show that patients who don't see nature, if you only see rectilinear man-made forms like brick, asphalt, concrete, you actually have the opposite effect, okay? You have more postoperative complications, more stress, and a worse clinical outcomes. So fast forward back to the green roof part of my life. So I work for a roofing manufacturer, which means that my specialty within green roofing is the roof membranes themselves. And so it's a constant education and training to keep up to date on all of these systems. So every city that I go to, when I'm working with the design teams or the building owners to do the green roofing, I also go around with our local sales guys and our local technical guys, and I just get up on a ton of roofs. And I see what's going in, I see all different kinds of buildings and what their roofs look like. So over the years, I noticed something very similar to my experience back in this hospital in Atlanta, is that this is what you generally see on a roof. Now, this is looking through the window of a hospital in Walla Walla, Washington, and this is a very common view for patient rooms on hospitals. And the reason why is because hospitals, they're built a little bit different than other buildings, other commercial buildings and similar structures, in that they are built a little bit at a time, okay? You're never gonna see the whole hospital built all at once. It's built in phases. And so they're generally these multi-level, very rambling buildings, and they're built on a little bit here and there, and all of a sudden what used to be a view of a garden is now, you know, a building's built there or an addition, and this is what you get. And I noticed this in every city. This isn't unique to any particular area. This is very commonly what patients see out of their windows. Okay? Multiple windows looking out over bare roof membrane. This is another hospital. So this one is St. Mary's in Walla Walla, Washington. This is in Oakland. This is the Washington Hospital in Oakland. And this is literally the patient view out their window. Okay? This is the maternity ward. So this is the first thing they see, these women bringing babies into the world, and this is what they're looking at. This is another building. I believe this is a cath lab, looking out, and many, many, many windows looking out over this. Okay? This is true everywhere. This one's in Los Angeles, Huntington Hospital. Okay, these are the window views. This is in Honolulu. Really hope I get this one. This is another building in Honolulu, and this is actually, again, very commonly what we see. This one is one of the worst because these are 2 different buildings facing each other, okay? Giant sections of roof and hundreds of windows, hundreds of patient views looking out over this. Okay, so particularly to healthcare, we know that vegetated roofs create all of these great benefits for just about any building. Some or all of these mentioned. I'm not going to go into them in detail because probably everyone in this room already knows about this. The biggest one, the easiest return on the investment, is that it's going to double or triple the life of your roof membrane if it's properly designed and installed and maintained. Okay, so that's true for everybody, hospitals as well. Energy conservation, stormwater, all of those goodies. The only one on this list that I think would be unique to healthcare that's really often overlooked is the sound attenuation. Okay, green roofs actually, plants and soil block a lot of sound. So depending on your building envelope structure or your other building features, you can reduce the sound coming into your building significantly. And this is it makes the most sense over places like ICU. So how many people in here, or maybe I shouldn't ask because of all the privacy patient laws, there are probably a lot of people in here who have had to be in ICU either as a visitor or yourself have had to go into ICU or maybe as a staff, hospital staff. It is a really stressful place. It's terribly stressful already. To be honest, most of the people going in there are probably not going to come back out. It's an awful place to spend time. But on top of that, you have helicopters landing, especially in a big urban area. You constantly have helicopters landing very close to the ICU so they can bring people into the ICU. And it sounds like a war zone. Okay? It's incredibly stressful. So here in the most sensitive part of the hospital where the doctors and nurses have to be on top of their game in all of this stress, and then you have this noise that's just brutal. So this is something I think is overlooked a lot. This is not why any of my clients decided to do a green roof, but I want to point that out because it is very relative to healthcare facilities. But moving specifically into the patient experience in healthcare facilities and what makes green roofing unique. So there are some fabulous studies that were collected together by Roger, and I don't know if it's Ehrlich or Ehrlich, I don't know. Does anybody know? Anyway, I have these studies I would be so happy to share with you guys, but he basically pulled together a lot of different studies that showed, mostly through the 80s, 90s, and to early 2000s, the benefits of patients who can see nature. Now, this could be through a window. This could be actually on, like in a garden or on a green roof. It could be something as simple as having plants in your room, but unfortunately that's because of sterile environments, you can't always actually have contact with the plants, but it doesn't matter as long as you can see them. So patients who can see nature have fewer post-operative complications. That one alone is a huge economic return to healthcare facilities. Post-operative complications are expensive, okay? They use less strong narcotic pain medication, they have lower blood pressure, lower stress, they get better chart reports overall, and ultimately they get out of the beds faster. And it seems counterintuitive to think that that's an economic benefit. You would think the hospital would want people to stay there as long as possible, but actually the longer that patients are in the beds, the more it's costing the hospital and the patient and everybody. So the best thing is for them to heal really fast and get out of there really fast so that the new patients can come in. So having shorter stays is a great economic return to healthcare facilities, but there's more. When patients get out of the beds faster, and when they have pleasant views, butterflies and flowers looking out of their windows, they have an overall better experience. They like the hospital better. And so do the visitors that come and stay with them and their families. And maybe it's the families that are making the decision to bring them to that particular hospital. So positive market identity is very difficult for hospitals to reach because nobody wants to go to a hospital. But then you think of a place like Oregon Health and Sciences University where you're getting all of these beautiful views. You're going to hope you go there if you have to go to the hospital, okay? This is the one thing that can help a hospital's market identity. Also, in the same collection of studies, it says a little bit about staff retention. Staff turnover is extremely high in healthcare facilities, nurses and doctors, because it's a stressful environment. So if you can have that one little grab to show that, or to increase the experience of the healthcare professionals and the staff, that can help you with staff retention. And I don't have a specific study to show those numbers, but I can tell you, and I can give you a lot of references of nurses and doctors after we've done a green roof on a hospital, coming back to me and saying, do you guys have any idea how much our experience is enhanced now that we can look out and see plants and butterflies instead of gravel roof membranes? So, and another great thing for positive market identity is that the community loves green roofs. They love to see green roofs going in. It has a whole community benefit even outside of the facility. So this is a way that hospitals can really increase their market identity and make everybody love them a little more. So the other thing that's unique to healthcare facilities is that they most of the time are going to run all day, all night, all week. There's not really any good time for patching or repairing or replacing the roofs. So when you can just tell them, we're going to put a roof down and you're not going to have to touch it for 20, 40, 60 years, depending on what system you go with, this is another huge return for them because not only is it the cost of not having to replace the membrane, but it's also the disruption to the facility. When you have to shut down an operating roofing room, even for a couple of hours, you're talking about many tens of thousands of dollars of lost revenue. And it takes weeks to put in a roof. And with all of the sensitive the sensitive air environment, air quality, and then you have HVAC intakes that are probably on your roof, pulling in potentially carcinogenic off-gassing from the roof membranes that are going down. Even really good low VOC roof membranes are not great. All of this has a really good return. Additionally, it's very difficult for healthcare facilities to meet sustainability goals, okay? They use a ton of energy, and there's not a lot of ways to get around that because of the medical equipment they use, but also because they can't keep a really tight building envelope. And this is because they have doors all around, double doors, wide doors, opening and closing all the time. There has to be that access. So they lose a ton in energy, and also it's difficult for them to recycle because of the single-use items that you have to use. You can't reuse a lot of the items. You use it once, you throw it away, and because of the biohazard, there's not a lot of recycling. So it's difficult for hospitals to, on their tight budgets, on their sterile environments, it's difficult for them to meet sustainability goals, and this is one way to really help them. Ultimately, this is between the sustainability goals and the patient experience. This is why at least our customers have chosen to do vegetated roofing. And then the other thing that's really great for healthcare facilities is that green roofs are expensive. They're more expensive than traditional roofing. We all know that. Over the long term, I would say they're not. They're least expensive. But initially, hospitals make decision a lot of times on first cost. So something unique about healthcare facilities is that people want to give them money. There are a lot of people who want to donate memorial gardens or different types of memorials. And if you're in an urban area that can't take a garden, it's a perfect opportunity to put it on the roof. And I'll show you some of that in a minute when I go through some case studies. Okay, back to pictures. So this is the same hospital that I showed you before, and I'm just going to run through a scenario here, what we did for this hospital. These are our contractors, our different certified contractors bidding on the new green roof, replacing the existing roof. This is Anderson Roofing, they're local here, replacing this roof. This is the sedum mat growing out at the farm. This is the layers of the green roof's components coming in. This was Enviroscapes Northwest who installed this one, another great local group. John, do you see yourself in this picture? So this is the day that it was installed, and this was it a couple weeks ago, which, let's see, it was installed, I think, in, was that August or, what was that, September install, and then, and then this was it a couple weeks ago. So we don't need studies to say that this, as opposed to this, is a completely different experience for the patients and the staff and everybody else. But we have those studies, so we can back it up. And again, please, I'm so happy to share these studies, so you guys let me know afterwards if you want. Okay, so let's move on to this one. A lot of hospitals keep all their mechanical equipment on the roof. They pretty much have to. So you're going to run into a lot of scenarios where you can't do a green roof. There's too many penetrations. And even if you did a green roof, you're not going to block these views out the window, okay? So this is what we did for them, is we put in living walls. And this is something that is pretty easy and simple, where as opposed to a green roof, you're going to want to put it in on a new roof membrane or a newer roof. This is something that's very easily removable so that you can put it on a really old roof. In fact, these roofs we had those down for, I think, 15 years. And we put these on, we can very easily pick them up, put the new roof down, and put it back on, very low commitment. And, you know, it just basically blocks the views of the mechanical equipment. So you go from this view to this. A few more of these. This is the Washington Hospital in Oakland. This is actually a different building on the same campus. So you can't see it in this picture, but basically this whole side are about 4 stories of windows looking down over this beautiful view, and then a brand new joint replacement facility with many floors looking right over this view. So the same thing, you can't do a green roof, a level green roof, so we put in living walls just to block it. And the other benefit of living walls, while you don't get all the benefits that you get out of green roofs covering a monolithic layer of your roof, you do at least get, aside from the visual benefit, you're cooling the mechanical equipment that you put it near. So if you have HVAC intakes or if you have other mechanical equipment, cooler equipment is going to run more efficiently and it's going to take less maintenance, okay? So just a few more images of how we blocked those. Okay, this is a hospital that did a green roof for a different reason. They don't necessarily have any windows that patients are going to see these green roofs, so they weren't really interested in that benefit. But they had, like many healthcare facilities, they had added on so many times. Their stormwater runoff system was all mangled and needed to be completely redone. They were having major flooding problems. Every time there was a major rain event, the hospital would get flooded, which is very bad for healthcare facilities and sterile environments. So while they were getting estimates to dig up their parking lots and redo this, they needed a new roof. So we said, well, why don't we do a green roof and see if we can save you having to redo all of these stormwater runoff systems. And so we put the green roofs down. Nobody saw them, so we could go with the lower cost, longer growing in. I think this was a mix of cuttings and plugs, but still from day one, processing the stormwater. And 90% of the stormwater that hits that roof, stays on that roof, is used by the plants and evaporated back out into the air, and they didn't have to redo their stormwater runoff system. This one's the National Institute of Health in Washington, D.C. This is a roof. It was just a big plaza area, again, another building where they had built on, and so you end up having windows looking out over the roof. And this one was a memorial garden. Somebody wanted to donate to the hospital, and they did it in the form of a green roof that you could actually access. And this one is just beautiful. They've made a lot of use of this one. They actually grow a lot of medicinal herbs, and they let patients grow things on this roof, and then patients also have access to it. St. Vincent Hospital, I love this one because they had a roof that still had some good life in it, and they didn't have the budget to do a full green roof system. So we just looked at what their budget was and gave them what we could, and that was just to take little sections right outside the, let's see, this one was a dialysis lab where they spent many, many hours getting dialysis. It's a long process, and so now they have a little bit better view to look out on. Well, that was a really pretty one. And St. Mary's Hospital, this is another St. Mary's in Wisconsin, and this one is actually used for therapy. So I think it's hip replacements or some type of joint replacement, and so patients are able to actually go out and have part of their therapy sessions, instead of it being in like a gymnasium type room or a small room, they do it outside when they can, and there's different levels and there's different railings and things like that to help them through this. This is a wellness center that, again, they didn't have patient window views that could see anything, but when you pull up, you can see it, and it's just good for the neighborhood. It's good for the market identity. And then this is another one locally. Jason King designed this one. Is Jason here? This one, the Van Ness Medical Office Building, is under construction right now in San Francisco, and they did this one primarily to reach their LEED points, because green roofs touch on more LEED credits than any other single building feature. They're right up there with bicycles and all of the things associated with bicycles. But this helped them meet their LEED goals, and then also for the patient experience, this actually has a lot of different levels, but pretty much every window view is either looking out over the natural setting or it's looking out over these green roofs. Okay, so that enhances the patient experience. Okay, so I moved through that really quickly. I don't know how much time I have left, but that about wraps up my green roof presentation. But what I want to leave you guys with is that every single building has a roof, okay? We have a lot of opportunities to do green roofs. Several years ago, we all thought that we would never be able to move as far as we have with vegetated roofing. It's something that everyone thought was crazy, and now look how far we've come without this extra benefit of knowing that patient experience is better. So this is a really great hook. This is a really great opportunity, and I would encourage everyone who has whatever contact you might have with a healthcare facility, whether you're working on their green roofs or their landscapes or you're a patient there, it's something to really consider. It can have a huge effect on all of us, and I think that's truly changing the nature of healthcare. So, this is in Honolulu. This is a rendering of, yeah, it's not real. This is totally photoshopped. I was hoping nobody would ask. This is yeah, me too. The University of Hawaii. Hawaii, of course, is an island, so it has a much greater benefits of having their vegetation stay on the island. Okay, they're losing, so they've lost something like 85% of their green space in Oahu. So the city of Hawaii has this great study that shows the benefits of adding vegetation to their roofs, and this was part of it. It was presented to their state legislature. And even though that's a separate state, that would be a great reference for people looking for specific returns on their investments as far as energy and stormwater management and keeping wetlands clean with the use of green roofs. Okay? Thanks, guys.
So if you have any questions of Liz, I think we can take them now. And anyone else who might have questions of some of the previous presenters too, I think we can take some of those.
Can you just shed some light on, those look like retrofits, most of those. So were there any architectural challenges in having those roofs except Ecoroof?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I forgot to mention, because hospitals are meant to be expanded, most hospitals already have the structural weight capacity for many floors to go on top of their roofs. So that's very easy. We did go in and get a structural engineer report or an architectural stamp on all of these. The only one that wasn't a retrofit was that new Van Ness Medical Office building. And the second part of it is that depending on what state you're working in, there are health codes that you have to follow. For example, California has really strict health code called OSHPD. And we did a lot of research and we got some pushback on some of our early projects, and what we found is that as long as you don't break into the building envelope with your irrigation or anything else, no anchoring, everything's just ballasted on the roof, which is the way we do it anyway, you don't cover any, you don't run into those health code issues.
So obviously your focus is going to be healthcare, but are there any other kind of commercial market segments where you've seen in your work people being completely interested in green roofs?
Yeah, schools for the same, and office buildings for the same reason. So even though we don't, I'm not aware of studies that show that students learn more when they see nature, these specific Ehrlich, I'm so sorry, I should have checked that out before I came. These specific studies are used kind of across the board to say, wow, well, if it has that much effect on patients, what is it going to do to the learning environment? So there's a lot of schools that are doing them as interactive gardens, and then also office buildings where they don't have space on the ground level for gardens. They'll put it on the roof, or they'll at least have window views that can see some sort of nature.
I was curious when we talked about the off-gas settings, the VOC for this, right? And how the soil imagine that would be filtered by it.
Well, generally, when you install a roof, whatever type of roof system you install, you let it off gas before you put anything else on it, before you do the finishing details. So most of that's going to go away before you put anything on top of it. So, but of course, we know that plants also process pollutants, so I'm sure there's some translation there of them being able to die. It's called phytoremediation, bioremediation. So.
How long would be an optimum time for the off-gas to be allowed for putting on the plant?
You know, it depends on what type of roof system, but generally between a couple of weeks to 30 days. Would you agree with that, Dave? Yeah, and that's standard for any roof system. You want to wait a little bit of time? Other questions? I thought I saw another hand. Oh, yeah.
What about tall geraniums or glassed-in green walls in hospital hallways or private rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about glassed-in. I
What
actually haven't heard of that, but
you want the oxygen, but you don't want the germs and the dust and the pollutants and the allergens. But
You
you
know,
can see the green.
I've heard that that's a big I don't work on interiors, but I've heard that's a big movement to put in lobbies, instead of doing artwork, doing living walls or some sort of vegetation. And it's funny, when you look at these studies in depth, they really tried to figure out where the benefit was coming from with the patients, and they thought, you know, okay, well, it's the color green, it must be the color green. So they started painting walls green in the healthcare facilities, and well, that didn't work, you know, and then they thought, well, maybe it's the oxygen coming out of the plants. Well, no, because you can see it through a window. So it's really hard to pinpoint what it is, but intuitively we all know. You're seeing life, you're seeing something refreshing, you know, you're having this a really beautiful interaction with something. You can't put your finger on it, but we know it's there.
What types of roofs are you putting in?
You mean what type of roof membranes? Mostly we do all different kinds. Built-up roofs, fluid-applied membranes. The only way we'll do a single ply is if there's something underneath it. So if it's like a fluid-applied membrane, like hot rubberized asphalt or something, and then like a TPA cap sheet on top of it, or a built-up roof with a TPA cap sheet. There's a great urethane coating that's available, but it's really important to consider how long your roof is going to last. So even though it's going to double the life of your membrane, if you're going with a membrane that's only a 12 or 15-year membrane, you're really losing the long-term benefits. The longer-lasting membranes are more expensive in the install, but just a little bit when you're talking about over the long term. So I recommend the thickest roof you can do, but I'm in roofing, so that's my bias.
Just to throw out the other side of a lot of people from Europe say, why do you need to have such a good membrane when you protect the membrane from all the things that are going to cause it to break down? So there's many perspectives on this issue, so that everybody works out what they want to see.
Yeah, well, we sell every type. We sell single ply membranes too, and there are good green roofs over single ply membranes. So you know, it's depends on the facility for sure. Yeah. No. Oh, well, we do in our ply sheets. And that's standard, I think, for any built-up roof manufacturer. They do fiberglass in their ply sheets. Is that what you mean?
Well, actually, molding
there is a urethane coating that has fiberglass reinforcement, right? I'm looking at my colleague over here who knows a lot more about it than I do about the specifics, what goes into the roof membranes, that has a fiberglass reinforcement. I mean, there's so many different kinds of roof membranes, and I would say just about all of them work, except for spray polyurethane foam. But pretty much any roof system you're looking at. The most important thing is just to get the details right, to get all of the flashing details. It's not so much about what product you use. I mean, you want to use a good product, but you've got to get the details, and the job site inspection is most important, not so much what type of roof system. Yes?
Most of the green walls that you showed in the slideshow use lining pads, which actually is different from a lot of what we call green wall.
Yeah. Extremely careful, because if anything goes wrong, we're on the hook for it, basically. But yeah, we're really careful. For that particular one I showed you, we had, that was also Jason King, a local landscape architect who selected the plant species. They weren't all native, but none of them were noxious. All of them were acclimated. The other thing that's important is to have a maintenance plan, and I think that's true on any green roof, to make sure they don't get, but we didn't get anything in there that's aggressive. And the other reason, I forgot to mention this when I showed you the slides, the other reason why we selected those planters instead of a modular system was, first of all, with the modular systems, you need to put it on the wall, and so you're penetrating into the building envelope, and that's where we ran into code issues. And then the other reason is because they are stand-up planters that have to, they don't have anything that they can attach into. These particular planters are a product called Turnasol. I think they're great. They basically meet the international building codes for overturn, and for, they're essentially, they're the equivalent of a parapet wall or a handrail. They can take a huge amount of weight, and they're not going to fall over or blow over, which is why we selected that product for this one. So that's called Turnasol. And I can't recommend them highly enough. They're great.
Yeah, Michael had a comment about.
Yeah, the gentleman in the back that had a comment about other commercial businesses that might be interested outside of the healthcare. And in Chicago, we've become kind of a foodie city, and our restaurant industry is booming, and also urban agriculture. And what we're finding is a lot of restaurants are starting to grow their own food on roofs. We actually have the first certified organic rooftop garden in Chicago on top of uncommon ground. It's a very popular restaurant, actually right near my condominium. Rick Bayless from Caudill, he grows on his roof. We have a health food store that actually was one of the recipients of our grant program. They're growing potatoes and all kinds of things on their roof. And one thing that the city did to help prepare ourselves for this is that we actually modified our zoning ordinance, because before we had nothing that addressed growing food on rooftops, so it wasn't allowed. So projects would have to come in and go through our variance process, which can be lengthy and expensive. So we actually updated our zoning code, so now we allow not only restaurants to grow food, but also both community gardens and commercial gardens to be placed on top of rooftops. So that might be something that your community would want to look at, just so that they're ready and they can make it easier for people who want to do it.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll break on lunch, and we'll have time to talk to the folks that have tested. When you're growing food on the roof, you have to be cautious about what kind of roofing, any separation between the roofing, whether it be like a modified addition roof, which is asphalt, tar, any separation from that makes its way into the plant.
For me? Well, yeah, on anything that would have a carbon base, bitumen, asphalt, anything like that, you always need a root barrier anyway. And then you would have your layers above that. All of the veggie gardens that I've worked on they're contained, they're in containers, or they're somehow separated through drain boards and things like that, where they're not coming in any contact at all. And you can get around that by using a single ply cap sheet on your roof system, so that you're not having that. But then, of course, single ply has its own stuff. But I think the most important thing is just to make sure your plants don't come in contact with the roof membrane. That's more just for long-term integrity of the roof membrane system, even more than what they're going to be uptaking from the membrane.
Yeah, I know that like copper mesh and things like that used to use the mass to protect the roof from the roots. Thinking about what's protecting, talking about organic material, certainly organic food sources, but they're over a lot of products that aren't meant to be injected.
Right. Yeah, I just keep them from contacting the roofs. Okay, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Great. It's so good to hear all the questions. I'm so glad that there's a lot of interest, and there's plenty of time to talk with the folks that have shared their presentations with you today. Just a few notes. We have lunch. It's out on the Sky Bridge, box lunches. There's a certain amount of vegetarian ones, and then a few different options, non-vegetarian, and I think some tuna. Some people asked for special lunches. Talk to me at the registration table on the way out. Reminder about the raffle that we'll have in the last session today. So put a business card in the fishbowl up front, and you'll be in the running for one of the really nice books that are up there. And I really encourage you to stick around. We've got some really great material in the second half of the day. Two fantastic case studies that I know will be very interesting. One of the largest green roofs in the city. Another, a really special commercial retrofit that's just an amazing spot, and I'm looking forward to people that haven't seen it to see that. And then the last two presentations about really getting at the bottom line and looking at that dialogue from a couple of different perspectives. And then, of course, ending with the last more social gathering aspect, and where we'll have some refreshments and some Rogue Dead Guy Ale as well on a nice sunny day after talking about green roofs all day. So enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back here at 1:15. Thanks.